welcome to Up Close with Carlos Sang, celebrating art, entertainment, and the human spirit. Welcome to the 100th episode of Up Close with Carlos Sang. It has been a huge privilege to be able to share with you so many lovely interviews with incredible people. For this 100th episode, I am so honored to be able to share with you an interview with an extraordinary leading lady of screen and stage. Her most recent credits include Mr. Bates versus the Post Office and The Crown, and she will soon be appearing in the upcoming TV adaptation of The Day of the Jackal and will be reprising her role in the hugely successful BBC series They Capture. On stage, she has won awards for her performances in Skylight and A Streetcar Named Desire, and has also taken on lead roles in The Vortex, The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, and Oresteia. It's a huge honor to be able to share with you an interview with the mighty Lia Williams. Lia Williams, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for asking me. I feel very privileged to be part of such an important podcast.
Yeah, I mean, it's an honor to have you. I wanted to start off by talking about Skylights because I remember when the show came back in 2014, a lot of people were quite taken aback by how relevant the themes still were. I was wondering, in 1995, coming out of the Thatcher years, how was that experience for you, telling this story each night?
Oh God. Well, it was just a fantastic experience on just about every level, really, because to work with Michael Gambon and Richard Eyre and David Hare in one room, it was at the beginning of my career, more or less, was an astonishing privilege. And I was very lucky in my early career to kind of work with these exceptional people, and I learned everything from them. They were my mentors, and I had an extraordinary sort of time with them. In terms of the story, it was kind of brilliant. I mean, David Hare is a great political writer, and I love his writing. And Skylight was really interesting because it had quite a strong political line in the sense that my character, Kira, taught in a state school, and she fell in love with Michael Gambon's character, who was an entrepreneur restaurateur. So he was the kind of embodiment of the capitalist Thatcher period, and she was the antithesis to that. But essentially, I think what drew people to the play was the love story, to be honest. And that didn't emerge until the rehearsals got underway. And we felt collectively that there was something a little bit missing towards the end of the play. And we were kind of deliberating over what this could be. And I suddenly, out of nowhere, sort of said, this is about love. And there needs to be a declaration of love in it somewhere. And probably towards the end. And David Hare, it got quite kind of affronted at this young actor going, I think we need a speech about love or some reference to the relationship that these two characters have had over the years. But he did go away, and Richard Eyre encouraged, and obviously spoke to him and encouraged the same. And about 5 days later, David Hare reappeared back in the rehearsal room and said, try this. And we sight read a scene that he had written. And it was that astonishingly beautiful speech that Kira says towards the end of the play, which is, I love you, I've always loved you, but I can't be with you. And it took our breath, and we were silent at the end of, my sight reading's terrible, so I read it really badly. But nevertheless, it left us silent at the end of that. And we knew that we had something really gorgeous and really accessible. So although, it's a very beautiful play and one of David's best, because although, to my mind anyway, and I seriously don't take the credit, he wrote the words, but it does have a political message, but it's also essentially a profoundly sad and very beautiful love story. And I think that's what drew people to it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, you yourself, you saw the Thatcher years and how that time, transformed Britain as well. How did you sort of like navigate, how to, present, the aftermath of that era, what were those conversations like with, Richard Eyre and Michael Gambon and David Hare on how to present that?
Well, I went into some schools and spoke to some teachers who were teaching in state school then, and to be honest, it wasn't far different than the way it is now, except now I expect it's a lot worse. Um, and I would speak to teachers who were trying to teach a class of 30 kids, all at different learning levels. And he was saying, well, how do I teach biology to this class when I have 4 or 5 different learning levels within the class? And how do I control the class as a whole? I cannot teach my subject well enough and with the passion that I want to. And then I went into an English class, and she was teaching The Selfish Giant, which I believe is Oscar Wilde, isn't it? And and she was teaching it beautifully, but she said she had been told to teach that as part of her term's, remit that they had been given to teach the class. And she said the problem is that, English needs to be creative, and it needs the teachers to be creative. And if the teachers can't think for themselves and teach things that they are inspired and excited by, and writers that inspire them, how can they then inspire the pupils to do the same? So there was a feeling then in these schools, from my understanding, in the brief time that I visited them, that they were frustrated by not being able to do their job properly because of the lack of funding and the conditions and the classes that were too full. And now I think there's a whole load more problems, mainly connected with social media being such a huge influence on kids. But then it was very much the divide between, Carol Churchill's kind of world of serious money, where she did a brilliant play about capitalism, rampant capitalism in the city, and the struggling state system. So yeah, it felt like a very strong divide at that time.
Mm. Were you surprised at all, when the show came back 20 years later and, the themes still felt so relevant? And, when you took the show over to Broadway as well, that the show still spoke to audiences there as well.
I think it spoke to audiences in a very different way there. They very much picked up on the love story, as opposed to the politics of the piece. And they did love the love story. They were generally quite baffled by the final scene, because quite brilliantly, there's no resolution to the play. There's no happy ending. It's kind of left hanging, which is a bit like life. It's very rare that things end and new things begin. Things just carry on. And but we have a need when we go to the theatre to see a beginning, a middle, and an end, because it makes us feel safe in the story. But Skylight, quite brilliantly, didn't really have an end. It had something vaguely hopeful, but it was kind of more like a dot 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 or a question mark rather than a full stop. And the American audiences said it was their European play, that because they felt European drama did that, which I found interesting. As to the 2014 production, I really don't. I didn't see it. I was working and busy, but I'm not sure I could have seen it anyway, because I did the play for 18 months all in all, starting at the National, then in the West End, and then on Broadway. So it was very close to my heart, and I think it would have confused me to see it again, even though I'm a huge fan of Bill Nye and Stella Gonay, wasn't it? And then it was Carey
Harry
Mulligan
Mulligan,
and
yes.
Bill Nye. Yeah, they're absolutely brilliant and wonderful. But yes, I hold the play very dear to me. So
Of
yeah.
course. I mean, when you look back at that time, those early roles and things like, the Revengers comedies and Oleana, Skylight, what do you think were some of the biggest challenges that faced you as a young actress at that time too?
Well, I think working with Alan Ayckbourn was probably the biggest and the most exciting challenge, really, of my career, in the sense that he trusted me, a complete unknown, with a massive play in 2 parts, with an astonishing leading role that he'd written for a young woman. And I've never really. It was so. I think it must have been ignorance and stupidity that made me step into it. But actually it was also to do with him. His writing was so brilliant and so truthful, so incredibly truthful, and so funny at the same time. It was a massive challenge to do that so early on, and it took a lot of courage. But he was a great teacher and a truly brilliant man. So, the thrill was more exciting than the fear. Oleana was thrilling in a very different way. I mean, they were really, really exciting roles, I have to say. I was very, very lucky. Oleana was Harold Pinter and David Mamet, and Harold and David had a long sort of friendship stroke mentorship, really, because Harold was brilliant at encouraging writers that he believed were really gifted. He did that with Sarah Kane, and he did it with David Mamet. And there's a story that David Mamet once sent him a play somewhere near the beginning of his theatre career, writing career, and said to Harold, "Is something wrong with this play? Can you help me define what it is?" And Harold said, "No, there's nothing wrong with this play, and I'm going to show it to the National Theatre." And that play was Glengarry Glen Ross, which is probably one of Mamet's most successful shows globally. So yeah, to be able to work with David Mamet and Harold Pinter again was like, and David Suchet was on such a great play, which again has stood the test of time. So yeah, it was fascinating and really challenging. It's a combination of having the courage to leap into the unknown and climb mountains, but also you just have to have an imagination. If you've got an imagination as a young actor, you're there, really. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, over your career as well, you've won a number of awards as well, for the roles that you've played, the Critics Circle Theatre Award, the Theatre World Award as well. Are awards important to you, and do you think they still play an important role in the industry that you work in too?
No, I don't like them. I never have. I don't really respond to them. I like to think that I do, and I can say to myself, oh, I don't like awards because, I don't win enough of them. But I think I'm tricking myself because actually, when I do win them, I don't like the feeling. I remember once a great friend and a truly brilliant actress, Claire Higgins, saying to me that when she won an Olivier Award for Hecuba, which I believe she did at the Donmar Warehouse. Frank McGuinness is another great writer. His text. She said it was one of the loneliest moments in her life. So she said there's I think there can be a feeling of that we need this thing because we need the affirmation, or we need this thing because it's very good for the business. It promotes the business and it puts us all out there. But nowadays with social media, we don't need any of that, And I find it odd to separate something that's so profoundly subjective, to sort of pick people out and make them more special than somebody else for a moment in time, particularly if you're dealing with a company of actors who are all working together. It kind of does an odd thing. So they don't mean much to me, but it's very, very nice to be it's very, very nice that a performance can get acknowledged, I guess. Yes, that is a nice thing. But I don't hold much. I don't need to win them.
Of course. Do you consider acting to be a great art form as well?
Well, it's a dangerous thing, isn't it? Because you can run the risk of sounding completely up yourself and on some sort of pedestal. But I think it's both an art and a craft. I think you have to have a skill set to do it well. And I think at its very best, it's an absolute art form. Yes, I fundamentally believe that with every bone in my body. I'm not sure that that's a popular view amongst young people, young actors now, but it's certainly been my passionate belief all my working life. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you've spoken a bit about social media as well, and your sort of absence from that world of social media. And I was kind of like wondering why that was, and would that perhaps change in the future too?
No,
Yeah,
no, I don't think I will. I don't think so. I think, for me, and this is an entirely personal view, so, it's not something that I would ever want to dictate to anybody else. But I think very strongly that everybody knows everything about everyone now. And particularly in the celebrity world and in the acting world. And we all seem to want to know everything about everybody. So there is nothing left there is no corner left for the art or the craft to thrive in a way. And I suppose what I mean by that is I have this image in my head of an actor, and you can apply this to film as well, but of an actor sort of turning up to a stage door in a dark alleyway with bicycle clips on and just come off the tube and a little bit wet and a little bit tired and disappearing quietly like a shadow into the stage door and then coming out onto this glittering stage as kings and queens and jokers and incredible storytellers of some form or another. And then at the end, the lights go down, the curtains close, and off they disappear back into the shadows, down the alleyway in their sweater and their raincoat, and off they go home. And I've always held on to that image very closely because I feel as if there should be something mysterious about us and what we all do. I believe that with all arts, I believe that with designers and sound designers and costume. I just think there should be an element of mystery about all of it because that makes it kind of magical. And there is a sense of magic to a lot of storytelling, which sounds very old-fashioned now, I know, and I am quite old, but I do believe in that magic. And I think you lose it if you know everything about the person who then steps out onto the stage as the king and queen, because all they want is that person. They don't want the king and queen in the story. So no, I don't follow social media. I don't do social media really, really for that reason. I love being, I went to see Giant the other night with John Lithgow at the Royal Court, and he did this magical thing, just one magical moment. He's a wonderful actor, and I'm a huge admirer of his. And because I know so little about him, and he's quite a private man, it made it even more special, I suppose.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, speaking of kings and queens, Mary Stuart, you famously were alternating roles with Juliet Stevenson, and similarly in Old Times, you were alternating roles with Kristen Scott Thomas. Just saying that, sort of terrifies me. So I was kind of like wondering how challenging, was it taking on these different roles each night, and how challenging was it, switching from one to the other?
Well, I think we all admitted quite magnificently, really, that we all felt like each other's understudy. Like it is the weirdest sensation. Um, because you don't quite know, you end up not quite knowing who you are. But what develops over time is a very defined difference between um, the performances, and therefore that influences how the play works and the other actors around you. So everyone has to behave. Everybody's parts change slightly according to who's playing which role on any given night. And I think because we were all, both Kristen and Juliet and myself, were also trusting and so respectful of each other's work. Um, I think it was really exciting, to be honest, because the versions of the play changed according to who was playing which role. So once you get over the shock of what you're doing, I mean, the thing about me is I've always been very impulsive, and I say yes to things, and then realize what I've taken on. So, um, it again, it was massive, challenging roles, and dead exciting and very, very frightening, and ultimately really, really fulfilling. And I think the audience got excited by the shifts as well, and they'd come back lots of times to try and get to see different versions of it. So it was great, and both Ian Rickson, who directed Old Times, and Robert Icke, who directed Mary Stuart, were brilliant at giving all of us, the three of us, are the space to do what we felt instinctively the parts needed, rather than trying to push us to copy or make something, you know, similar to somebody else's. We were encouraged to be entirely our own interpretation, which was you know, just really inspiring. And also just really inspiring to work with those actors as well.
Yeah, of course. I was just like wondering as well, how challenging is it, creating your own interpretation of a character when you're also watching someone else play that same character on different nights too?
Well, you're not. I mean, well, I suppose that's a really good question, actually, Carlos, and not easy to answer. It was different for each show, actually. So Mary Stuart, we were rehearsed in separate spaces, so we could fully develop something very individual to us. So while Juliet was rehearsing downstairs, I would rehearse upstairs, and then we'd swap over, playing the different, playing each role. So Rob was very, very keen that we didn't get into a place where we were observing each other's roles all the time, and therefore feeling that we couldn't develop our own fully. And then with Kristin in Old Times, where those roles are kind of interchangeable anyway, because they're part of the leading man's memory. So who were these two women, and how did they sit in his memory? And were they actually interchangeable anyway? It's a magnificent play. But so with any of Harold's work, you get so absorbed in the part that you're playing at the moment that you're playing it, that you don't even consider, you just respond to the other actors on the stage. You don't even consider, oh God, that bit that Kristin did is just brilliant, or or I wouldn't do that, or I would do that. I'm going to copy that because it's so good. That doesn't even come into your head because you're just inside the story. And that's to do with the sheer intensity of Harold's storytelling and his characters.
Yeah. I mean, you've worked with some incredible directors, as you mentioned, Ian Rickson and Robert Icke, but also, the likes of Dominic Kirk and Richard Eyre, Nicholas Heitner. When was the moment for you when you decided that you too could also be a director as well as an actress?
Well, it actually came through film. I was reading Raymond Carver. Do you know Raymond Carver, the writer, short story writer, American short story writer? Absolutely brilliant. He's got an ability to say a lifetime in 20 pages. It's astonishing writing and very, very beautiful. And I was really taken with Raymond Carver, and I thought, how does he do that? How can he do that? How can he say so much in 20 pages or 15 pages or whatever? And I got fascinated by the idea of trying to tell a story in a very short space of time. So I decided to try and make a short film, and that's how it started, really. And I wrote to Tess Gallagher, Raymond Carver's second wife, and I said I want to make Feathers, which was a short story of Raymond Carver's. And she said, "Well, I'm flying into Heathrow Airport, oddly, because she lives in America, on such and such a date. Let's meet for a coffee." So I got myself to Heathrow Airport, met her, bought her lunch, and talked her into letting me have the rights to make it into a short film, which I did. And I thought, and I did it with Brendan Gleeson and Ian Hart and Sophie Thompson and Jane Horrocks, and it was an amazing experience, and which partly failed and partly succeeded, but it led me to do more. And I've done 4 short films and a feature documentary, but it started in film, and I thought, I can't direct theatre because I don't have the academia to direct theatre. I can only direct visual. And then Jamie Lloyd got in touch with me, and Emily Vaughan Barrett, and they said, would you like to direct Ashes to Ashes at the Pinter Theatre? Because Antonia, Harold's wife, would like you to, Antonia Fraser would like you to direct something. And I said yes, again without thinking. And I did. I directed Papa Essadou and Cato Flynn in Ashes to Ashes at the Pinter Theatre. And what I discovered was that I could use the same instinct that I used and the same visual sense that I used for film. And that, and perhaps I didn't need to quite undermine myself in the way that I was doing about my intellect, particularly with Harold Pinter, because I'd worked with him 9 times and I'd done lots of his work and I've done lots of work with him. So I just applied that experience, which sometimes you're not aware of, you didn't know you had, and it's just there to call on. So yes, I directed that and I absolutely loved it. And of course, Papa and Kate were magnificent in it. And that led me to Daniel Evans, who I think is the most brilliant man and incredibly gifted. And he then asked me to direct Doubt at Chichester on the big stage, on the big main stage, which and I suppose the thing about directing is that when you play a character, you just see one color on the canvas. You just see the color of your character, and when you're directing, you see the painting, the whole painting. And I think what happened over the years is I got to see more and more of the painting. Although you do speak of Dominic Cooke, who I think is an absolutely wonderful director. And I remember when I did As You Like It with him at the Royal Court, not at the RSC. He said to me one day that I have a natural instinct to be able to see the whole thing and not just my thread in it. And that's always been true. I've never known how to read a story in another way. I've always had to read the whole story and agree to do the whole thing, rather than just, oh, that's a character I like, or that part's not big enough or too big or not good enough or whatever. I've just been story-led ever since the beginning. And I think that's why writers quite like working with me, because I'm very story-led.
Yeah. I mean, when you're approached as an actress now, do you think your experience as a director has made you look for particular qualities in a director that you work with now too?
Yes, I mean it's very, what you realize when you direct people is how fragile actors can be, and how even the ones who appear to be robust have their own sensitivities, and everybody has a profoundly different way of working. So you can't possibly treat a group as one person. Everybody's very different. Everybody has different needs. And I think you've got to be incredibly sensitive to the creative process. And I would argue that it's being eroded at the moment, and that I feel as if there's a little bit of draining of respect for the actor's creative process at the moment, because we're becoming, the business has become an industry, and it's very brand based. And then we become a bit like products on the conveyor belt, or we can be. And if we take a stand and we say that's not okay, because we're expected to just get on with things, and sometimes the creative process doesn't allow that. Every actor thinks differently, feels differently, reacts differently, and that should be really respected in any space, anywhere. Yeah, I feel that, and I think that's changed a lot.
It's interesting. You mentioned As You Like It earlier as well just now, and I was quite surprised that you've not actually done as much Shakespeare as I thought you had done, and I was sort of like curious as to why that was as well.
Oh, yeah, another good question. Well, I was never asked to do things. I was never asked to do Juliet, for instance, which I would have loved to have played. So I don't know quite why that happened, although I did get to play Rosalind, and that was just beautiful. And then I played Goneril in King Lear, which I mean, my feeling about a lot of Shakespeare, if not all of it, is that it's so magnificent on the page and it's so profound and it kind of stuns me to silence when I read it. And very rarely do I feel like it comes off the page successfully because it's just it's almost too much to perform. To me, it's almost like it's kind of unperformable because it's so profound and it's so extraordinary. But maybe that's just a modern take on it, because at the time that it was written, they were just fantastic stories about the human condition, and they were kind of performed without that kind of methodizing, if you like, from actors. But I suppose I've always enjoyed reading it more than I've enjoyed performing it. But I do think the greatest thing I've ever seen was Ralph Fiennes and Vanessa Redgrave doing Coriolanus on film, which took my breath away. They were magnificent together, and I remember thinking that I wanted to play Coriolanus's mother one day. Yeah. Even though it's just two scenes, I think it's two scenes, they're just magnificent, breathtaking.
Mm,
So yeah, yeah, I've been drawn to other things more to perform than Shakespeare.
yeah. As an actor, do you feel like you are more drawn to other people that you're working with, or are you more drawn to, the characters and to the script itself?
I'm totally script driven and character driven. Yeah, that's what that's what has always been my drive. I've never thought about anything else. I do think carefully about the director. Yeah, that's very important. But yeah, yes, I'm mainly story driven.
Earlier this year, I spoke with Joshua James, who you, of course, worked with on The Vortex. And it was so interesting, hearing him talk about, your relationship, going from mother to son to being colleagues to being great friends as well. I was also like wondering, whether you could any shed any further light, on your relationship. And, what was it like getting to work together on The Vortex too?
Well, I think Josh and I have a mutual respect for each other as actors and a mutual sort of independence, which makes working together kind of effortless and surprisingly easy. We kind of know how to finish each other's sentences in a way, but we don't live in each other's pockets. And I think Joshua's a magnificent actor who very much cuts his own path, and he doesn't have a need to feel pressured by outside forces. He just cuts his own story, and I admire that enormously. So it was an amazing sensation acting with him on the stage, because there's just a trust that is rare and unexpected, to be honest. And we didn't need to discuss it. It was just there, and it was present, and it was kind of brilliant. In fact, we've been asked to do an excerpt from the Vortex together for a gala performance at the Prince of Wales Theatre on the 17th of November for 100 years of Noel Coward, to celebrate the 100 years of Noel Coward's plays. And it's going to be with Judi Dench and Ian McKellen and lots of stars. And Josh and I have been asked to do a little clip from a scene from the Vortex, which we feel very lucky to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I was curious as well, due to your close relationship, was it harder to, explore those more violent aspects of Florence and Nikki's relationship too in the play?
No, it wasn't. It was surprisingly easy because we just trust each other, and it felt strangely effortless, really. Which is kind of odd, isn't it? But but it did, and I think when you feel that free with somebody, and that when you feel that lack of judgment, and with somebody, you can go anywhere, you can do anything. I mean, it's the basis of great acting, and we were very aware that we were actors acting. So we were quite clear about that. I mean, I would say that any part in any play of any worth rubs off on you in some way. So I think we were left with a little bit of bruising, but I don't feel that. I didn't feel that that was because it was Joshua and myself. I just felt that that was a play doing its thing on um, two porous actors. Um, so yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I'd argue that I get involved in every part I play. So it's just what you do.
yeah. I mean, when Josh was growing up, were you always encouraging him to go into acting as well, or was he interested in other career paths?
I remember a teacher saying he should be an architect because he had a very good eye for design. But Josh had absolutely no interest. There was nothing I could do. And the odd thing was that at nursery school, when he first went to nursery school, and I hope he doesn't mind me telling this story, but when he first went to nursery school, they didn't know I was an actor. The teachers didn't know, because I don't advertise it. And I picked him up one day, and the teacher, and this is, Josh is like 3, and the teacher went, "Oh, he's an actor." And I went, "Oh, really interesting." And kind of, locked it away. But Joshua has found his own path through. Yeah, very much so. I mean, obviously, he's been influenced by a mother that's been acting since, I was in the West End at the age of 20. So it's all he's known me do.
Yeah, I feel like of course more recently Mr. Bates versus the post office, it's sort of galvanized the whole nation. And I was also like wondering as well, having had such an important role in that series, have you found yourself becoming more recognized as well, and do you get approached on the streets at all when you're going about your own business?
I'm quite good at disguise, in the sense that I disappear into the roles rather than bringing the roles to me. So I don't get recognized a great deal, to be honest with you, because I have a changeable face. But with Paula Vennels, if I do get recognized, and that does happen, they're just really fascinated by the story and wanting to talk about it and wanting to share the horror of it, really. It was an extraordinary piece of work and very important, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like not many of us really knew that much about Paula Vennels until the show came out. I had no idea she was a priest, for example. What sort of surprised you about Paula Vennels as well when you started working on the show too?
Well, exactly that. I thought, what an extraordinary contradiction. She's clearly got a very corporate mind. She comes from a very corporate background, and she's a priest, and she wanted to become a bishop. That was her plan. So she must. All I can think is, I don't. I think very few people are truly evil, but I think she buried her head in the sand, and I think she buried herself in her faith, and she set up her own set of truths for herself, and she stuck to them, and I think she was way out of her depth. I don't think she had a clue about how much the post office sat closely to the heart of the nation. It's a bit like the NHS. And she'd been part of a whole corporate stuff before then, like a whole corporate world, like Morrison's or Aldi, or I'm not sure what it was, and don't quote me, but she was in retail, on boards, and I just think, and it was a clever move, to bring her in to turn around the post office into a multi-million pound business, which was what she was brought in to do. But in doing that, she had no idea that she was tapping into something that had such huge sensitivity around it, and also the absolute scandal of what was going on. Um, with Horizon and Fujitsu and I don't think she dug deep enough because I don't think I think she was too frightened.
Mm.
Mm. So yeah, although it's difficult, isn't it? Because I'm guessing, I'm really
Yeah,
guessing.
I think you're probably right though. I don't think she's fully aware of what her role in this whole scandal is either.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
she might be fully aware, but I think she's told herself that she wasn't. So I think she's cut her own set of truths out of
Mm,
it, and I think I think she's had to do that for her own sanity, really.
mm.
But I just don't condone that at all. Mm.
Yeah. Do you think you would ever want to meet Paula Vennels in
I
person?
asked, I did desperately want to meet her. Yes, I really did. And I absolutely would like to. It's very, I mean, I was playing her, so I felt like and the other actors were meeting, well, some actors don't like to meet the people that they are having to um, represent because they feel like they want to bring their own interpretation to it without feeling like they've got to copy somebody who's real. Um, but I would have liked to have met her, but she was surrounded by lawyers, so I couldn't get anywhere near her.
Mm.
Nobody could.
Yeah, later this year as well, Day of the Jackal is of course is also coming to Sky. I was wondering what can you tell us about this upcoming series as well, and what was it like getting to play Isabel Kirby too?
Day of the Jackal's a great big wonderful 10-part series based on Frederick Forsyth's novel, The Day of the Jackal, and the film with Edward Fox. And Eddie Redmayne is playing the Jackal. Lashana Lynch is playing the person who goes after him. And it's kind of a contemporary version by the very brilliant writer Ronan Bennett, who did Top Boy. And yeah, and it's a great thriller, very exciting, convoluted story. And I play Isabel Kirby, who's a sort of boss at MI6. I'm not going to tell you more than that because there are some twists and turns, and I will give away who she is. So I'm not going to say more than that. But I think it's going to be. I've got a feeling it's going to be really, really good. I mean, it's a classy piece.
Yeah. I mean, the book and the film are so well loved. I think a lot of people are really excited for it. Yeah.
They've done a really smart thing because they've some of the very famous scenes from the film they have replicated like shot by shot, so frame by frame even. So it's maintained its kind of iconic status. It's like a tribute to the film, so it's really great.
Yeah. I was just wondering as well, you've played so many incredible roles and, done so many incredible films, TV shows and plays. Has there been one character which you look back on which you think has particularly changed you as well and made you look at life differently?
That's a really good question. I think each part you play influences you in some way. I think you're attracted to parts because you recognize some small thing in them that you recognize in yourself. But then when you step into that character, they start to teach you things. And so you start to expand a little bit more through the people you play. Ultimately, it's a study of what it means to be human. And so the more parts you play and the more you discover and the more you research through the parts that you're playing, the more extraordinary you recognize the human being to be. And it's endlessly fascinating. But I learn something from every role I play, or the role teaches me something from every role I play. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, without a shadow of a doubt.
Do you ever see yourself directing yourself in a project in the future as well?
No, I have no interest in that, and I don't think I'd be very good. I'm not very good at directing myself, I don't think. or I don't think I would be very good. I'm not sure. But no, I'm not sure I could do that. I'm not sure I could step into something and be fully aware of the thing that I'm doing.
Mm.
I think that would be a weird contradiction for me. Some people love it and do it brilliantly, but I don't think that's me.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see if it ever happens. But yeah, just as the last question, when all is said and done, what do you most want to be remembered for?
I don't know that I want to be remembered particularly. uh, I'm not sure I look at things in that way. I suppose if push came to shove, I would like to think that some of the roles that I've played have inspired or affected people through the stories and the roles that I've played have done something to somebody somewhere at some time. Because that would mean there's a connection. And you know, I've always felt that the most astonishing moments in theatre are not it isn't laughter or applause, it's silence. And sometimes when you play a role, you can get the most incredible silence in this space. And it's as if all the audience, you know, 800 people are one person and they're all silent, and that one person is silent. And it's kind of the silence of recognition of what it means to be human in that moment, or what that particular character is saying at that moment resonates um, across the whole audience. And that's really, really special and really quite beautiful. And so if I'm to be remembered, it would be somebody somewhere going, ah, yes, I saw her do that and that changed me in some way, or that helped me see something, or that inspired me, or that kept me going, something like that.
Definitely. Lia Williams, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks very much for letting me ramble on. It's been a pleasure.